Let's be realistic about Emma's future, Mrs. Henderson said across her desk, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that comes from 20 years of telling parents their children aren't special. Perhaps a trade school would be more appropriate for her learning style. I gripped the arms of the uncomfortable plastic chair in her classroom, forcing myself to stay calm while my 16-year-old daughter sat beside me, her eyes fixed on the floor in humiliation. What Mrs. Henderson didn't know, what she was about to discover in the most spectacular way possible, was that the mail carrier had just delivered a thick envelope to our house that morning, and inside was an acceptance letter from MIT offering my daughter a full scholarship with a special commendation for being their youngest admitted student in a decade. Her learning style, I repeated carefully. Can you elaborate? Mrs. Henderson pulled out Emma's file with the theatrical sigh of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. Emma struggles to pay attention in class. She doesn't participate in discussions. Her homework is often incomplete. And frankly, her test scores, while adequate, don't suggest college-level aptitude. Adequate? I leaned forward. She has a 3.8 GPA. Grade inflation is a real problem in modern education, Mrs. Henderson said dismissively. I've been teaching AP Calculus for 20 years. I know the difference between a student who understands the material and one who's just getting by. Emma's hands were clenched in her lap. I could see her fighting tears, and my heart broke for her. Not because Mrs. Henderson was right, but because my brilliant daughter had spent months hiding her genius to avoid being singled out by teachers who felt threatened by students smarter than them. And the Stanford math competition? I asked, where she placed second in the state. Math competitions aren't the same as classroom learning, Mrs. Henderson said with a patronizing smile. They're good for confidence, I suppose, but they don't indicate real-world intelligence. My phone buzzed. A text from my husband Marcus. The letter came. You need to see this. It's MIT. I silenced my phone, but not before Mrs. Henderson noticed. If that's about college applications, I really wouldn't get your hopes up. Emma applied to some very competitive schools, and I think you'll be disappointed. Actually, I said slowly, that text was about an acceptance letter that arrived this morning. Mrs. Henderson's smile became even more condescending. Well, there are many fine state schools that, from MIT. The smile froze. I'm sorry, what? Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The letter arrived this morning. They've accepted Emma into their undergraduate program, with a full scholarship. I pulled up the photo Marcus had texted me, showing Mrs. Henderson the MIT letterhead. Would you like to read it? Mrs. Henderson's face went through several shades of pale as she stared at my phone screen. This must be some kind of mistake. No mistake. They also included a special commendation, noting that Emma is their youngest accepted student this year at 16, and that her application essay on quantum computing applications was one of the most impressive they'd received. Emma lifted her head for the first time, looking at me with wide eyes. Really, they said that? They said a lot of things, baby. I squeezed her hand. We'll read it together when we get home. Mrs. Henderson had recovered enough to sputter, but her classroom performance has been deliberately mediocre because she learned in 9th grade that teachers don't like students who are smarter than them. I kept my voice level, professional. Do you remember Connor Walsh? The student who corrected you about the application of L'Hopital's rule last year? Her face flushed red. That was a difference in teaching methodology. You gave him a C on his next 3 tests and told his parents he was disruptive and argumentative. He transferred to online school. I pulled out my own folder. I'd come prepared. Or Jessica Torres, who tried to show you an alternative proof method she'd learned from a university textbook. You told her she was showing off and that your way was the only correct way. I don't appreciate these accusations. And Emma, my daughter, who made the mistake of explaining string theory to you after class one day because she was excited about something she'd read. I looked at Mrs. Henderson directly. You told her that fancy theories don't matter if you can't do basic homework, and gave her detention for talking back. She was being disrespectful. She was being brilliant, I said quietly, and you couldn't handle it. So she learned to hide, to dumb herself down, to turn in just good enough work so you wouldn't feel threatened. Emma was crying now, but they were different tears. Relief, maybe, validation, "Mom," she whispered, "can we go home now?" "In a minute, sweetheart." I turned back to Mrs. Henderson. "Here's what's going to happen. Emma is withdrawing from your class, effective immediately. She'll finish her senior year through MIT's early enrollment program, taking actual college courses that challenge her. She's only 16. She can't. She can. MIT specifically offers early enrollment for exceptional students. They'll provide transcripts that will complete her high school graduation requirements." I stood up. "And Mrs. Henderson? You're going to write Emma a letter of apology, a real one, acknowledging that you underestimated her and that your teaching approach failed to recognize her abilities." "I will do no such thing." "Then I'll be speaking with Principal Davies about the pattern of gifted students leaving your class, and how your inability to teach advanced learners is impacting this school's reputation." I smiled pleasantly. "Your choice." We left her speechless in her classroom. In the car, Emma finally broke down completely. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have told you how bad it was. I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't as smart as I thought. Baby, no." I pulled over, turning to face her. "You are extraordinary. You always have been. Mrs. Henderson is one person who couldn't see that. But MIT saw it. Stanford saw it. Yes, you got in there too. The letter came yesterday. And Caltech and Carnegie Mellon and every other school you applied to. Wait, I got into Stanford too. Full ride. They called me personally." I wiped her tears. "Emma, you have 5 schools fighting over you. MIT won because of their quantum computing research program and because they recognized how special you are. Why didn't you tell me about the other schools?" "Because I wanted to wait until after this meeting. I knew Mrs. Henderson would try to crush your dreams. I wanted you to hear her say all her worst things before you knew how wrong she was." Emma laughed through her tears. "That's kind of savage, Mom. I learned from the best. Your grandmother did the same thing when my high school counselor told her I wasn't PhD material." I started the car again. "Which is why I made sure to finish my doctorate before you were born. Never let small-minded people define your limits." At home, Marcus had laid out all the acceptance letters on the dining room table like a celebration. 5 envelopes, 5 full scholarships, 5 of the top STEM programs in the country. "So," he said, grinning at Emma, "I guess that trade school idea is off the table?" Emma laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Yeah, Dad, I think I'll pass on welding certification." "Shame. I was looking forward to you building me a custom tool shed." We spent the evening reading each acceptance letter, with Emma growing more confident with each one. The MIT letter was the most impressive, not just the scholarship, but the personal note from the department head inviting her to join a special research program typically reserved for graduate students. "They want me to work on quantum error correction," she breathed. "Mom, that's cutting-edge stuff. That's world-changing research. That's my daughter," I said proudly. My phone rang. "Principal Davies, Mrs. Morrison? I just had a very interesting conversation with Mrs. Henderson. She's quite upset about some accusations you made." "I'm sure she is. She says you threatened her." "Job." I pointed out a pattern that could be damaging to the school's reputation. "Whether that threatens her job is up to administration." I put the phone on speaker so Emma could hear. "But since you've called, you should know that Emma will be withdrawing to complete her senior year through MIT's early enrollment program." Silence. "Then, MIT accepted her? Full scholarship, special commendation, youngest student in their incoming class." More silence. "Mrs. Henderson told me Emma was barely college material. Mrs. Henderson is wrong about many things. This is just the most recent example." "I see." He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Morrison, I need to be frank. We've lost 3 gifted students from Mrs. Henderson's class in the past 2 years. All transferred or went to online school. This is a pattern I should have addressed sooner. Yes, you should have. Would you and Emma be willing to meet with me to discuss what happened and how we can prevent this from happening to other students?" I looked at Emma, who nodded. "We'll meet with you, but Mrs. Henderson needs to be there too. And she needs to hear directly from Emma how her teaching approach impacts students who learn differently or think more advanced than her curriculum." Agreed. "And Mrs. Morrison? Congratulations to Emma. MIT is extraordinary. Emma is extraordinary. MIT just recognized it." The meeting happened 2 days later. Mrs. Henderson sat stiffly in the principal's office while Emma, with a confidence I hadn't seen in years, explained exactly how she'd learned to hide her intelligence. "I figured out in 9th grade that being smart made teachers uncomfortable," Emma said. "So I started turning in B+ work instead of A+ work. I stopped answering questions in class. I pretended not to understand things that were obvious to me." "Why?" Principal Davies asked gently. "Because when I didn't, teachers called me a show-off, or said I was being disrespectful. Or, like Mrs. Henderson, told me I was trying to make other students feel stupid." Emma looked directly at her teacher. "I wasn't trying to make anyone feel stupid. I was just being myself, being curious, being excited about learning." Mrs. Henderson had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't realize. I thought I was maintaining standards, keeping students humble. I didn't see that I was crushing curiosity." "You were," Emma said simply. "And I'm not the only one. Connor Walsh is taking online courses now because you made him feel stupid for being smart. Jessica Torres barely speaks in any of her classes anymore because you taught her that knowing things makes you a target." "What would you have me do differently?" Mrs. Henderson asked, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely interested rather than defensive. Emma thought about it. "Celebrate when students know more than you. Encourage them to explore beyond the textbook. Create space for different kinds of intelligence and different ways of understanding. And maybe remember that your job isn't to keep students in their place. It's to help them reach higher than they thought possible." Principal Davies was nodding. "Emma, that's very wise. And Mrs. Henderson, I think you should use the rest of this year to reflect on your teaching approach. We'll be implementing some changes to how we support gifted students, starting immediately." 3 months later, Emma was settling into her first semester at MIT. She called home regularly, always bursting with excitement about her classes, her research, the other students who were finally on her intellectual level. "Mom," she said during one call, "I had coffee today with 2 other early admission students. One is 17, one is 16 like me. We were talking about our high schools, and they both had the same experience, teachers who made them feel like they had to hide how smart they were. It's more common than you'd think, baby. That's so sad. Like, why are we punishing kids for being smart? Why aren't we celebrating it? Because some people are more comfortable with average. Exceptional makes them insecure." "Well, I'm never hiding again," Emma declared. "I'm going to be exactly as smart as I am, as curious as I am, as ambitious as I am. And anyone who has a problem with that can deal with their own insecurity." That's my girl. A year later, Emma's research on quantum error correction was published in a major scientific journal. At 17, she was the youngest author they'd ever featured. The university press release went viral, and local news picked up the story. Mrs. Henderson saw it. She emailed me, a real apology this time, not the grudging one Principal Davies had forced from her. "I was wrong," she wrote. "About Emma, about my teaching, about everything. Watching her success has forced me to reckon with how many students I failed by making them small instead of helping them grow large. I'm working with a mentor now, learning different approaches. It's hard to change after 20 years, but Emma deserves better than the teacher I was. All my students do. I showed Emma the email. Should I respond?" she asked. "Only if you want to." She thought about it, then typed, "Thank you for the apology. I hope your future students get to be their full selves in your classroom. That's all any of us really wants, to be seen for who we actually are, not who others think we should be." She hit send, then closed her laptop. "Mom? Thank you for believing in me even when I stopped believing in myself. Always, baby, always. Because that's what parents do. We see our children's light even when the world tries to dim it. We fight for them when they're too tired to fight for themselves. And we remind them over and over that other people's limitations don't define their possibilities. Mrs. Henderson thought Emma wasn't college material. MIT knew better. And so did I.